I'll call us to order. Thank you all for joining us for the second day of our July State Board meeting. We have today a series of reports, and we thank folks from schools who are here for that process, and then also, of course, staff who are crucial to our understanding of what's going on. We start with a report that was delayed from last month, and that's the Little Rock School District Quarterly Report. And this is as laid out in our earlier motions. We hear quarterly on the progress of things in Little Rock School District. And I'm going to start with Dr. Wild, and then I think Mr. Poor will also be a part of this presentation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Richard Wild, School Improvement Unit. In the letter that's in your packet, you can see that we asked Little Rock School District in the fourth quarter to do a self-reflection, to do a written self-reflection, and that we asked that to do that self-reflection that they would take the schools that were classified in academic distress and do an analysis of the first 3-quarter 45-day progress reports. And we asked them also to project out what would be the next steps in relationship to their findings. And we're very appreciative of the report that they submitted. If you look at the 3 schools they submitted that report on, it is a fairly accurate self-reflection and is very much in congruence with our speculation or our findings. And so we wanted to make sure that that got before the state board, because this is a model for where we're headed in the future. And when we get to the 45-day progress reports, we'll talk a little more about how we envision going forth in the future. But on a quick note, you're able to identify if there's an impact in any of the leading indicators by looking at the 3 quarters at the same time. The first 3 quarters. The other part is that the first 3-quarter progress reports for a district can become a segmented diagnostic analysis. So you can actually use that as setting your goals for the next school year. And then the third part, why is that important? And as we're looking to marry up with ESSA and Act 930, what will be helpful is for schools to do their next year's improvement plans in the spring as opposed to doing them in the fall. So that way when they get to the school year, the plan is already set. So I want to compliment Little Rock School District. They took the written report very seriously, and it was a fairly I certainly think it's a quality report to you. That said, for the most part, there was not an expectation of presentation, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Poor.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wild, and appreciate members of the State Board to allow us just to talk for a few minutes. I want to put a little context into things, if you don't mind, and it's easy to think about, where we're at as a school district, and there's pluses and minuses, and I'm sure all of you get to hear some of those pluses and minuses on your daily walk. But let's think for a second that this is a district that's cut $41 million out of its budget over a 3-year span. And I'm not asking for anybody to feel sorry for us, but let's instead of feeling sorry for us, think about what that has meant for the employees of the Little Rock District to stand up with some of the results and some of the work that's gone on. Because when you lose $41 million, you're going to impact employees in terms of who's serving our kids and the different types of roles you condense and you change and you shift staffing around. All those things could be used as excuses to say, we're not going to move forward. Well, that's not the case. And I think you've seen that in your report, but then if you go look at it in terms of just some other things, and I wanted to kind of highlight just really quickly some things that I think are significant. We understand that when you think about educating a child, it's more than just what happens in the classroom. There's a whole other set of things that you have to do to wrap around and support children. Reminding you as a state board, and I bet you remember this in the fall, that we are the first in the nation, as far as I know, to have every one of our preschool kids and K-5 kids get a dental screening. They get a dental screening, they get assigned a dentist if they don't have it, and they get their teeth varnished. Now, you may say, well, what does that really do? If we have a toothache, I tell you, we're grouchy. We don't eat as well. We don't sleep as well. Kids are no different. And so we have handled that and now have that as a part of our delivery in the pre-K through 5. Family literacy, huge thing. And you know, one of the things that sometimes the district gets attacked on and say, well, what are you doing for reading? I'd like to have some of those same people be able to shout out to say and support what goes on in terms of family literacy, whether it's work with Charlie Conklin and AR Kids Read, or with our own family literacy, the Lemonade Wars, which if you go ask a Little Rock School District kid about the Lemonade Wars, they will tell you about the Lemonade Wars, okay? Middle school, I'm excited to share with you that one of the targets that I presented to you last fall was that we needed project-based learning. If you remember, that was one of the things that we said our middle school was in danger, and we have engineered a partnership with Ford, Arkansas, and the Clinton School. Every one of our middle schools now has a partner, and I think we kind of framed some of that previously as an example. The Heifer International tied to Dunbar, and the Zoo tied towards Henderson, and UMAS tied towards Pulaski Heights, just as examples. But we got to quantify that partnership. It can't just be haphazard. And so the Clinton School graduates will be working throughout this first semester to actually establish what that partnership looks like, what's the right give and take, and how do we bring in real projects for our kids to solve. And I think that's very exciting. High school, I'm very pleased to share that one of the targets that the commissioner gave me was to develop a world-class career development center. Our Excel program that is a part of the CAPS network, that's a national level CAPS project-based learning environment. We have 150 plus students that were ready to go serve in the first semester. And just to quantify that, in Bentonville with their Ignite program, the very first year we had 15. Bentonville grew to 200. This year they're going to be at 500. We started off with 150 students, and we've got great partners. But right along with that, our Metro program, almost all of our key things have doubled. Let me highlight one that you'll love. Our police force, law enforcement group, has doubled in size, and we have Chief Buckner, who has really supported the program, and we will have a police officer that will co-teach with our teacher in the classroom right now. So I'm proud of that, because it fits a community need as well as creating a great career potential for some of our students. Most importantly, you want to finish off with pre-K through 12 success, and we had right around $25 million worth of scholarships, which I believe sets a new benchmark for Little Rock schools last year. And again, that's pre-K through 12 success when you have that kind of scholarship money coming in. When you look at the data for the 3 schools, and obviously those are important, but right along with that, with the help of Dr. Wild and his staff, Mr. Tolbert, who helped us last year, and now we're excited to have Mr. Hernandez. I think I shared with you before about an Achieve Team model, and the Achieve Team model really fits in very well with what the state has moved towards in terms of really having the sites and the districts own their own circumstance and saying, what is it that are your sticking points? Where are you not moving the needle? And what are your barriers in terms of trying to move it? Our Achieve Team model, I think, worked extremely well. And if you look at all the schools that were served as a part of the Achieve Team model, and then you go break that down in elementary, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then the different areas of the contents of where things are tested, and again in middle school, high school, we had gains in over 60% of those schools in those specific areas. So this isn't a psychometrician report, and I'm sure, I don't know if Dr. Cummings has arrived yet, but or Ms. Allen, but that in my eyes, when you look at that, first off, it's not a drop, it's things that are increasing, and we're excited about that with the Achieve Team. And then you can go even a little bit further, elementary, when you look at our scores versus the state scores, and try and just kind of match up, well, where did we have gains, where did the state have gains? And again, I'm really pleased on that we had basically 7 areas where we scored higher than what the state did in terms of gains, from one year to the next, and one area was kind of flat. On the middle school, we actually did really well. We had 9 of our areas exceeded what the state's growth was, and at the high school area, 5 of them. with one flat area, and the middle school had one flat area too. So those are things that, at least in my world, they're statistically significant. I'm not sure that the psychometricians will agree with that, but I like looking at that data and just kind of trying to slice it a little bit. When you then look at the three schools that we have to worry about right now and work together on, there are several things that are exciting. Probably Henderson is the school that you will realize is the closest to potentially moving the bar to get out of the distress tag. When you look at their ACT score results, 11 out of the 15 areas they went up in, with one area being flat. So there's 3 areas where they dropped. That could have been in science in 6th grade or so forth. But it was a good testing environment that we had with Henderson. And the other thing that we're pleased with is that we have several other factors happening with project-based learning at that environment that we're pleased. We know we have to do some things differently, and a part of that is just continuing with where we're at. I appreciate how Dr. Wild shared that. When I look at it, and hopefully you see this in our report, is we don't want to just throw out what we started last year and just say, okay, done. What we really need to do is put our nose to the grindstone now and continue to work on it, because at really all of our sites on distressed, probably one of the key challenges that I see as a superintendent is every one of these places has young teachers that are dynamic and wanting to do great things, but they don't have the skill set to engage the learner in an appropriate way, especially when many of the learners are 2, 3, 4, even 5 grade levels below. Yet you also have learners in that classroom that are 2 grades above where they're supposed to be in terms of their average. So, that type of science of teaching is what we're working on, and we're trying to make sure, especially at the middle schools, that we're trying to personalize learning more and trying to make sure that we implement more of a blended learning model, especially at Henderson, which we will continue to do. When you look at Cloverdale, the results at Cloverdale, in 8 of the 15 tested areas on Aspire, they did go up. They were flat on 3. So again, I think that's a significant thing for Cloverdale in terms of moving forward and showing that we're on the right path. One of the things that I appreciate we get a great deal of support from the state on is what we're trying to do to support our English language learners. And we have really targeted that at this school, and we have to continue work on it. The other ouch point at Cloverdale is just in student behavior, and in some ways you could even say teacher behavior, because we have a higher rate of absences for both teachers and students at that campus, and then we have some discipline issues. But a part of that is about, first we have to make sure that our instructional delivery is really sound and that it's engaging kids, and the second aspect of it is that we've got to have our kids have greater ownership. One of the things that we did last year was allowing our students to actually have their own task force, and we need to continue that, because we really made some strides on that for the first 4 months, and then our data showed that the last 2 months discipline referrals really went up through the roof. Also, out of the different tested areas, 8th grade is probably the place where we had the least positive results at Cloverdale, which tells you that, that ownership piece, again, we've got a chance maybe with the 6th and 7th graders moving up to 8th, that we can hopefully continue to improve that climate. Hall, and Mr. Burton's here today to help me if we have any questions about it, but there are several things about Hall, and if you look at first off their test results, they went up in 5 of the 10 tested areas, and then we're flat in 4 of the areas. Now you may say, well, that's just so-so results. Again, not being psychometrician, but if you looked at the results from the Park to the ACT Aspire, we actually looked at those results a year ago and said it looks like Hall went backwards in terms of its progress. That was quantified by the state when they did their work to try to, look at the 3-year average, and it looked like Hall had kind of a drop. I think that when you get the report, once the group that puts all this together, you're going to see that Hall, it took a tick up. Is it enough to get him off of distress? No, I don't believe that will be the case, but I think it's positive. And the other thing that I felt, and Mr. Burton could address this if you have questions, I actually thought that they gained more traction and legs as the second semester went, partially because in the second semester They were doing so many different things that trying to move forward on school-wide AVID. They were trying to do things to unite under a School of Innovation plan. They were coming together as a staff. The other exciting thing is that we've hired a new principal at Hall, and his name is Dr. Mark Roberts. He has served in multiple sites in both Colorado and California, and he has had a great start with the staff that he's interacted with and the community he's interacted with in his first 2 or 3 weeks. So we're excited to have him on board, and we think that that's going to help Hall continue to move in a positive direction. With that, I'll stop. I probably did more than I was supposed to, Dr. Barth, and I appreciate the opportunity just to share a little bit greater capacity than even the report that you were provided several months ago.
That was perfect in terms of a very concise overview of the big issues, and I think a very honest appraisal of kind of what the latest data tells us in terms of where things are going. So thank you very much. I know I have some questions, but I know folks up here are going to have questions as well. I'll start with Ms. Chambers. You have anything at this time? Mr. Williamson? Ms. Newton?
Just want to compliment you on your hard work. I know that it's difficult when you have such a big ship to try to turn, but I think we're starting to see the turn. And so I really appreciate all your hard work, and not just yours, but your staff, your teachers. It takes all of us working together, and you've been able to bring them together and work real hard. And so I really appreciate that work. The question that I have is, as a district, what do you feel that is the most outstanding problem that is facing you, and what, I guess, is your biggest challenge going forward?
First off, I appreciate the compliment, and we'll put it back into those first words that I really think that our staff has done a tremendous job, and I appreciate you recognizing them because they've kind of, things happen, and we've had to do a lot of challenging decisions, but they just continue to strive to move forward. And we've kind of taken on a phrase that we're going to be better tomorrow, and we're going to be better next year, and that's our approach. So when you look at our challenges, I think that there's several things that continue to kind of be the things that we have to do to move forward on. One is, we should never forget that the culture and the climate of a building is really critical to having students have buy-in, staff have buy-in, and parents having buy-in, and then even the business community. So I don't want to ever lose sight of that's something that we have to continue to get better at. A second thing, it kind of goes back into an earlier comment that, creating engaged learners and what that means in a second grade classroom versus a seventh grade classroom versus someone that's a sophomore. Those are all different things, and how we move forward in terms of trying to make sure that we really are engaging the learner, and that we're doing it in a way that's developing their skill sets and developing a passion about learning. One of the most exciting things that lends itself to maybe seeing that we're starting to have that happen is if you go look at our writing scores. Our writing scores across the board had some of its biggest growth. Now that's kind of a combination of skill sets coming together, and I'm hoping, it's a one-year deal. But I'm still excited about that, and I'm hoping that next year we see that too, because I think that's a continuation. Final point is that as a part of legislation, and then also just how we're looking at things, is that we've got a real responsibility right now to try to look at how we deal with discipline. We can, it's easy to get into the thing that here's the hammer and there's the nail, and we need to look at things differently in terms of how we work with young people, because sending them out for 5 days and 10 days, it just increases the gap, and so we've got to find ways to instill not only the PBS model that the state has helped us move forward on, but in our district we're really going to be spending time, and our leadership training next week will include restorative justice. So we're working on that as well, and bringing that into the district. We had a little bit of it, just started to scratch the surface on it, but we will move forward on that in a more aggressive way over the coming year.
Your enthusiasm is contagious, I promise. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cochran?
I just would love to know how family engagement plays into all of this. I'd love to hear that restorative justice is something that you're talking about, and I wondered how family engagement is playing into all of this.
Well, we we think the whole family engagement piece is really critical, and so there's multiple ways that you have to look at that. And one of the things is, we've always said, well, if you have a dinner, families will show up, and that still holds true. But the other aspect is that I really think we hit a home run with our literacy effort and doing the Lemonade War and having all kindergarten through 5th grade students all reading the same book. It was a book that was fun to read, families enjoyed it, and then there was also a financial literacy component that got built in. We had adults coming into the building that had never been into the building and seen an urban place, and they're like, wow, these kids are great, and the staff is awesome. So it changed some mindsets of people because they got to come in. And then our parents got really involved, and unfortunately our culminating event got canceled. But you're going to see more of those type of things. On the, you're bringing up a key point on restorative justice, is that it's really about trying to look at the partnering of family, the child itself, the victim, the school officials, all working together to try to find a way to kind of rectify what the problems are and find a better way to move forward. And it takes everyone to have that kind of ownership. So I think that's one you'll need to ask me again next year to see whether we've been successful at that. But it's supposed to be a key component.
That's very exciting.
Great. Thanks. Ms. Ruthven?
Thank you, Mr. Poor, and thank you, Mr. Burden, to your whole team that are here today. I was in a meeting a couple days ago with leaders from the Latino community, and one of the first things they said to me is, Superintendent Poor is doing a great job. I hope you guys keep him there for as long as possible. We're really excited about what they're seeing in the community and feeling excited about your leadership. And regardless of who I meet with here in the district, there's no doubt about the level of expertise that you've brought to this district. I got to witness it firsthand in Bentonville. I'm proud to get to see it here with Little Rock, and I'm proud to see what you brought to the table with and what Mr. Burden and our local leaders have been able to bring together in terms of a collaboration around knowing the community. And so it does not surprise me how thorough your reports are, the progress that we're seeing, the innovation that's coming out in the programs. And I want to join my colleagues in applauding that. I think this is exciting in that element. A couple weeks ago, a grade level reading campaign that I know many of us are familiar with and the department's working with held a webinar in which the topic was actually, as Ms. Cochran had noted, family engagement. And the conversation started with the comment, we are not going to turn around schools if families are not engaged and if they don't feel like they're part of the process. And as a community organizer, I think the mantra that I feel like defines who I am, what I do, what I try and bring to the table even in this role is nothing about us without us. And so I know that this will be on our action agenda next month as we talk about the second lien bonds, but you have a concerned community that's even wondering, not only do they not have a local board, does their vote even matter? And obviously there's, like I said, an acknowledgement that there's no black and white as we talk about this, right? There's a whole lot of gray when it comes to Little Rock, and I get that. But I do think that that's something that needs to be addressed. And as we move forward, that we really have the opportunity here that the community feels like, that all stakeholders in the community feel like they're having voice and say that's getting recognized in this process. And there are definitely sectors in our community, members of our community that don't feel that way. Despite wanting to be there and celebrating the success, they want to feel that they're part of the decision making, that your leadership demonstrates that you value that they can make decisions in regards to what's the future of the Little Rock School District and their specific schools. And I would pose that as, I hope, an opportunity ahead. I hope next month as you come before us in the action agenda that maybe we'll hear a little bit more in regards to that, because I will say for definitely sectors of your community, it was a slap in the face getting that decision at the end of the June. And I get the financial argument. I'm not deaf to that. But it did make members of the community feel like their vote didn't matter. And it's just when we've already taken away local control, to have that as well was a hard blow for definitely members of your community. And so I pose that to you, and something I hope to hear for next month. And I guess I pose to the commissioner, because I know several of us have had meetings with Mayor Stodola here in Little Rock, and the city directors sent us a letter kind of asking again about a timeline and what the future looks like. So I don't know if in the conversations around Act 930 in the months ahead, if there's going to be an opportunity of that. The most I could speak to the mayor was we're having these conversations because of, in large part, Act 930. And I didn't know if you have anything additional to offer, Commissioner, on that, as I know, again, the city directors and even the mayor are asking these questions.
I'm not sure how much more detail of a timeline you want, other than what I've given you previously. We will be, as yesterday, the action that was taken under Act 930, and the next steps, which I have explained before, and that it would be looking at these numbers, that August 1 would begin that review of the processes, which Dr. Hernandez is going to be talking about, Ms. Kaufman. Those are things that have been discussed and explained, and will be explained in further detail as we move forward, so that we are having those conversations and will continue to have those conversations.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Anything else? No. Okay. Ms. Dean?
I just wanted to echo my colleagues as well and say thank you and congratulations on the progress that is being made in Little Rock School District. The people that I have visited with, I'll echo what Ms. Wright said, is that there's always good things to be said about Mr. Poore. To go back to your point of discipline, that being a serious issue and a challenge for Little Rock School District, I met with Mr. Frank Williams at Henderson, and he had really good things to say about him working with you and the Reclaiming Scholars Program and the success that they've had with that, with the Tendaji Project. And I look forward to them having an opportunity to maybe come and speak more about that. But
Ms. Dean, can I just share real quickly
Sure,
what that means?
please.
What this is at Henderson, of course, one of the schools that's under distress tag, and we want to have not lose any time with any one of these young people. So when there is a discipline matter that takes place right now that is going to potentially cause that student to be gone for 3, 5, 10 days, where they go is they go over to St. Mark Baptist Church, and they go to the church, and there is actually instruction taking place, and there's also work to modify the behavior. And if it was a 10-day suspension, but the church says this young person is ready to come back tomorrow to be ready to learn, we're all about it. Comes back within a day. Maybe it's 2 days. But we're cutting down all the suspension times in this unique partnership with St. Mark's. So thank you for highlighting that.
You're welcome. And I think it's a prime example of what we've been saying over and over here at the board, is that for us, for any community to have a turnaround, there has to be the collaboration between the schools, the teachers, the parents, the families, the community, the business owners. It's not going to be until, and the faith community as well. When we all work together, we can really get some things done, and I'm excited about the expansion of that program and the ideology and the concept of us all working together in the community to raise up our school district and to help our children in the end. So.
Echo what Ms. Newton and Ms. Dean have said. People stop me on the street that I don't even know and say, I don't know what you're doing in Little Rock, but it's great, and I don't know where you found that man, but he's great, and he takes the time, and you know, that is a wonderful first step in getting this community as far as parent engagement, faith community, and all of that, so thank you for that. I also was at present when one of your schools presented at Economics Arkansas, And those students were very impressive, and you could tell there had been a lot of leadership. I know as we go into ESSA and 9:30 that there'll be a lot of emphasis on from the district level to help the schools, things that an individual school needs help with, needs support with. And one of the things I was wondering, on those schools where children are coming to your middle schools so far behind in reading and or math, have you seen a pattern of what elementary schools may be feeding that? And I'm not asking you to name them, but that would be the district support that I see that could be helpful. And number one. And secondly, when we talk about the culture of a school, I'm wondering in those buildings where you have an issue of staff absences, is that may be a culture. I might not feel bad about missing if a lot of the other people miss. So spreading those people out, not giving other people the problems, but maybe moving people to a building where that's not an issue. And maybe it's an issue everywhere. We don't get the reports to that level of detail on your schools that aren't in academic distress. So it may be a district-wide issue. But just thinking in not just the culture of understanding the child and the parents and the people who you are teaching, but understanding the culture within the school. Those are things that from the district level that you and Mr. Burton and your staff have to, I call it the 30,000 foot look, where you can see the whole. But overall, the Achieve, the Excel, all of those things are very exciting, and I do appreciate the work y'all are doing, and I appreciate the transparency that you're making an effort to do, and Lord willing, everybody will come along.
If I could, Mr. Martin, to respond to Ms. Zook, one of the things that Mr. Burton, when we prepared for this presentation, goes, she's going to bring up feeder pattern, and so we we did know that was coming, and.
You're predictable, Ms. Zook.
That was a prediction.
That was a nice way of saying it.
Well, once an educator, always one, right?
That's right. And one of the things that it may be a little bit frustrating, but in some ways we're still green on several things. First off, remember that this is a district that now, last year was its second year of doing virtual assessments. And the rest of the world had been doing that for a long period of time. So there's an adjustment there. There's an adjustment then in terms of, how data flows and what works. We have Dr. Cummings here as our head of our assessment, and what we do to try to make people aware. We're still trying to make sure we understand how to use ACT as Aspire, the formative assessments that are done. We met with the national group this week, and I know the neat thing was that with the work that's being done on the instructional side of ADE, that we had some, I think we're having the same concerns that the state is bringing forward in terms of what that assessment is on the formative side, because we're not getting enough information about growth of students. And I think that the company is going to respond to that. That's critical, because if you don't understand the growth that's taking place on your students, you can kind of say, well, things didn't go well at this elementary and here, but you really got to understand where they came from, where they started, and where they moved towards. And, I'm not going to back off the fact that we chose to go with ACT Aspire interim assessment. You all paid for it. That's one good thing. The second thing is that it allowed our students to get more comfortable with taking what's going to then be the summative assessment. But I will tell you that if the adjustment for ACT doesn't go well during the course of this year, we don't feel like our needs are being met, we're going to change the interim assessments and do that in a collaborative way so that we can get better data. Because that's a key thing of what you're asking for, is understanding where growth is occurring with individual students and within individual classrooms. And I don't think we're quite hitting that yet. And that's, you can say, well, that's a problem for, well, first off, it's a problem for your superintendent. I've got to figure out how to work with my team to address that. But it also makes it hard then for the teacher that receives students of seeing what they've done and what worked, or this kid fell off last year. Why did that happen? There was a 3-year track record of growth and just totally fell off. Is that because it was the teacher? Was that because there was a family event that occurred that took them off track, and we need to address that? We don't really have that, in my belief, the way that we need to really address what you're bringing forward. So we've got work to do in that area, and I think we need to have work done with the state to help us on that.
Thank you.
Great. I know Ms. Chambers has a question, Mr. Buck?
I just wanted to say, you have made a lot of progress, but you've got a lot of work still in front of you. You even have the right to celebrate, but it's not time to celebrate yet. You need to continue going, and I see good things happening.
Thank you, Mr. Black.
I didn't want to miss a chance to dogpile and to thank you, Superintendent, for everything, all the good that is going on right now. It is very encouraging. You spoke to just a second ago what my question was going to be about, which is so frequently when you're here, you are sharing in a very thoughtful way the things that are happening, but I don't remember you very frequently asking us for anything. Is there anything from a board perspective that we could do more of, do differently to support you and the community in furthering this good work?
Well, I'll pay homage to Ms. Reith that, one of the things she talked about before is just, what we're going to do when we eventually sit down and start to think about, okay, with this act going forward, what is it that we do to try to create the connections? I think that particular discussion of what we do with the act and moving forward, that's going to be very interesting, in terms of what we all do to try to work together on that one. And I think the other thing is that, there's a lot of things that get thrown out. Sometimes the most negative things end up getting highlighted, and just that counter push of just trying to say, yeah, that's true, or yes, he's brought it up and we need to address it. But there's also needs to be shared all sorts of positive things that occur on a regular basis, because if we allow ourselves to get beat up all the time and don't push out some of the things of what we're doing, that we get momentum by sharing what's going right with the world, being real at the same time, but let's create momentum on things that are going well, and there's plenty of those things happening within our staff and our community, and of course with our kids.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Just a couple of things. First off, I'll join the praise, and I'll actually probably give you the biggest compliment I can give you, which is you wear incredibly well. Is that I like you a lot more than when you arrived. You were very likable when you arrived. But I just think that, that's what makes for a long-time sustainable leader for any entity or any community. But I think that is very important, and it highlights, I think one of the key challenges facing the LRSD over the decades now really has been stability. And I think that you have that potential to provide that kind of long-term stability. And so I want to thank you for who you are, but that key trait. I do have a couple of questions, specifics. I want to ask a couple of things about Hall, and which obviously, as you noted, remains kind of the biggest challenge. And one is a kind of a more immediate question in terms of what's the short-term plan at Hall High. And I know there has been some work done on a School of Innovation plan. I know there's some leadership changes there, but if you could just kind of talk through your vision of what happens in the short term at Hall to begin to move numbers. But then, and I don't want to let the cart get ahead of the horse in terms of, I know some of this ties to the second lien bond issue, but what's the longer term plan in terms of what Hall High looks like in 5 years, if you're able to kind of see that through?
Okay, I don't know, you may have to cut me off at some point. There's a lot there, but the first thing, and Mr. Burton, jump in if I forget anything, but one of the things that, there's several things that happened during the course of going into last year that were critical. One was the development of a 9th grade academy, and so that things changed in terms of the teachers and what they were doing together, as well as what the expectation was for the incoming 9th graders. getting a full-time school improvement specialist was a big deal, and then the addition of City Year at Hall. So those were things that occurred that were big deals. The Achieve Team model, when we met with Hall, not only did they talk about the innovation status, but they also wanted to talk about AVID and making it school-wide AVID. So the strategies that are a part of AVID are good for all learners, and those that are at risk and those that are maybe above grade level. So we've got to continue that type of work. The other thing that's unique, and you may remember this, is that we're moving to a block schedule. Now, that makes both Mr. Burton and I just a little bit nervous about it, because if you think about a block, if we do this right, it's going to be awesome. If we don't do it right, and you have a kid in there for 90 minutes and it's all direct instruction, our results will drop. So it's a matter of how we utilize that time to support. That's a key thing this year, and the professional development that's been happening that Mr. Burton has set up, not only for leaders but for teachers, and that will go throughout the whole school year, that's really critical. That's probably one of the biggest things that's going to start to determine how and whether or not we're moving forward with Hall. And of course, the new principal has that as a responsibility. So that's kind of on the instructional side of the house. The other thing is that, continue to work with our English language learners at that site. And I don't have a breakdown of the scores of how those students did last year to know whether or not we made strides with them, but that's something that we need to look at. And, if you look at the bigger, if I can shift now to facilities, at this point in time, many people don't realize, but many of the learners that are English language learners are being bused from the very southern and southwest tip of the district. Almost 300 kids take a bus ride up to Hall that can end up being a 45-minute bus ride. So if we move forward on the second lien loan and have McClellan and Fair, and I can throw in a pitch there, McClellan is an absolute awful learning environment for everything from heat and air to the gaps in between the rooms and inadequate science. There's just everything that you could possibly say wouldn't be right. Fixing that, but also then bringing those students back to have ownership within their own community, I think that's a big deal for the kids that are at Hall. But that also then means that you've got to change it at Hall. So one of the things that has to be executed in terms of some long-range planning on the capital side is, moving forward on this right now in terms of the new high school in the Southwest, it starts to do some things to address some needs that, in fact, we have lawsuits against us to say we're not doing it. So we're addressing those things on that lawsuit. It also allows us to hit some of the other big areas in the district where we have big facility gap needs, and we're not going to get as much out of it as what if we'd got the election passed, but we get $90 million that gets infused into our district to help kids. The longer term question, and it really will need to have a whole bunch of people at the helm, is you've still got all sorts of other things that need to be looked at. For instance, Central is another critical spot when you start to think about facilities, because if you think about their facility, they've got portables all over the place. And the price tag to remove those portables and to build a better science environment, and if you wanted to keep the number the same, you're looking at about $30 to $40 million. But it also is an opportunity of what you might do differently with Hall at that point in time. So, there's kind of going to be a domino effect that's going to have to take place, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to participate and think this thing through. And the final thing that I'll share is that if you ultimately, maybe where your question going, Dr. Barth, the elephant in the room is, will that lead to boundary changes? Well, I start twitching, okay, if you think school closures is tough, a boundary change is even that much more dramatic. But it deserves a whole another set of community involvement whenever you start to think about that. But there's a unique opportunity as we start to work on all these things. But you have to do first things first and address the most dramatic need, which is McClellan. it's a dramatic need. And then at the same time, we're going to go make air conditioning better for places, and we're going to improve lights and in classrooms. So we're going to have an effect on this second lien loan if you all approve it, which will be a discussion in August. But that's just a starting point. And there's still, remember, the Fannie Howey study shared that there's over 350 or probably at least $350 million worth of needs. So this just takes a small chunk of that away. We have a lot left to work on as a community to figure out what those next steps will be.
Thank you. And my final question is, obviously, I know what has happened with the ongoing planning regarding the use of the schools that have been closed, but my question was really about what has been done to help the families whose students were in those schools who are going to have to be transitioned earlier than they would have expected. What's been the work?
Oh,
that's been
that's
done there?
a real success story. I'll first off share that we had open houses all, and I don't remember now the date that this occurred. I want to say it was in April. Was it April? Because you were part of going to some of those. In April, that all of the families got to go to their new site. Now, before the families went to the new site, we actually had videos that were broadcast into each of the schools where they were closing, Wilson and Franklin, to show what the new places were like, and the principals and the staff all welcomed them. So there was kind of a non-threatening thing that initially occurred, which is video. The second piece is to allow the kids to come up to the site and get to meet their principal and some of the teachers and have a little assembly, so they got to do that. Third was having the families come in. I got to personally go to Stevens. Mr. Burton, I think, was at Vail, where the families were coming. And we had family members, and I don't mean this to be hurtful for Franklin, but we had family members from Stevens saying, we didn't do this for how long? Why didn't this occur? Because they saw what Stevens had in terms of its facility. It's just that much better facility. So we had all those types of transitions that occurred, clear back in April to kind of create that softening. The other thing that occurred that's important is that our staff, they've all now been placed. I think we're down to maybe 4 people that are secretaries that haven't found a home. So we've got all the displaced teachers taken care of from those sites. They're at homes. The principals have been found a spot and have got their new environments for next year. So we have handled the people part of this as well to get everybody settled.
Thank you. Great answer. Ms. Newton?
I have one question that I meant to ask and I forgot, but one of the things that we talked quite a bit yesterday about was teacher recruitment and retention. There was huge numbers of, we had a report on the number of ALPs and the number of long-term subs, not just in your district, but all across the state, and it's a tremendous problem. And one of the things that I thought about is when we have a teacher that's on an ALP, they're getting support because they're going to school and hopefully getting support from the district. But sometimes those long-term subs in a district get overlooked, and they're not always given support. And I was just wondering if you're giving long-term subs that are in classroom support during the year, and if you're not, that the superintendent from El Dorado came and talked to us a little bit yesterday, and he talked about some of the different things that they're doing to support their teachers, and they are doing an outstanding job, and he might be a point of contact if you're interested in doing some of the things to support teachers, not just your certified teachers, but every teacher that's in a classroom in your district.
I appreciate you saying that, Ms. Newton, and we will reach out to them. I also want to just point out another weakness then, just to be real with you all, because I always try to be real, is that we don't do a great job of communicating to families when this occurs. And that's something that we've talked about now in Cabinet this year of what we need to do differently, because sometimes a person's gone for 4 or 5 days, and then it ends up being 10 days, and then it ends up, and then you have to protect that individual's privacy, but we also need to make parents aware of what that situation's like and include them, because we had numerous examples during the course of this year with long-term subs that our parents just never really felt like they understood. And so we're hoping to do a much better job on that end, and I also appreciate your suggestion of working with El Dorado.
Yeah, the programs that they presented were outstanding, so that would be a good contact, I believe.
All right, anyone with Commissioner?
Mr. Porter, a few months ago, I'd asked you about the level of public participation because we continue to hear concerns voiced about the community voice. And I asked you then what was the level of public participation in the Community Advisory Board meetings. Could you give us an update on that?
It's minimal at our Community Advisory Board meetings. Very few people attend. Of course, we do have it on TV, and so people are able to watch the discussions. The shame on that is that if you look at what we did with the department, and we got great support from the commissioner and Mr. Gocher on training these guys. This Community Advisory Board, in terms of governance, it's probably one of the best governing boards I've ever got to work with in terms of how they interact with each other, how they interact with staff, the questions they ask. They are doing a really, really good job. And unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily get seen. And so one of the things, Ms. Chambers, that you brought up of how can we help, it would be, really, as you hear people either bring concerns up, have you attended a Community Advisory Board meeting? And obviously, public comment is also allowed to take place at those Community Advisory Board meetings.
Ms. Dean?
When are those meetings?
We
Like
are
what
going to
time of
have
the
a
day?
discussion next week to see if we're going to permanently move the meeting to the third Thursday. This past year was always on the second Thursday, which conflicted with you guys' state board meeting, and that caused a problem sometimes with us getting some of your staff to come, and even what sometimes I had to do. So we're looking and hoping we'll have a vote next week to see whether we're going to permanently move the meeting to the third Thursday,
What time of the day?
5:30.
5:30.
I know one of your, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, as a parent, that's a little early for me because I don't usually get off work until 5. So maybe there's a way to move it later or something if you want more community involvement.
I'll bring that up. Thank you.
Ms. Hook?
Yes, I know one of your Community Advisory Board members, Coach Clark, runs a terrific program for his community down in the church and serves all of the Southwest Little Rock, and they work on preparing kids for ACT, helping them get homework, feeding them after school and everything. So not only is he serving, but he's also serving his community, and he's to be commended for that.
It's certainly, and yesterday, members of the commissioner staff, I hope I'm saying, I'm drawing a blank now, Ms. Pittman, am I saying that right? On your staff, Ms. Pittman was there, and the city to recognize ESY, that's the name of the program, for everything that they do for students. And if you want to get an uplift during the summer, that's a great place to go down. But they also work in with our kids after school, and a part of our responsibility is to get the kids bused there to get that extra level of support. It's a program that does work.
Wonderful. Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Poor. We appreciate it. We will see you very soon.
If you'd like to, tomorrow, 8:30, there's a walk in our community, Victory Over Violence. So I just share that with you. And then I will be walking at Dodd, probably around 10 or 10:30, and then we'll go to Roberts after that and walk that neighborhood. So if you'd like to join us, just give me a ring.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pro. All right. Everybody good for, okay. So we heard the second report yesterday, so we move to the third report, and we go back to Dr. Wild for the fourth quarter and year-end reports for the priority schools for last year.
Richard Wild, School Improvement. Want to downplay the fourth quarter reports. There are a lot of data points that don't necessarily occur in the fourth quarter. As you take a look, we really don't want schools doing interim assessments in the same quarter they're doing the summative or the annual assessment. To a degree, there are a lot of activities going on, so we're not expecting them to do 3 post-test or every 3 weeks actually administering an assessment to see if students had learned. And so what because our format has been to give you the 45-day progress reports, we're giving you the fourth quarter. It's not that we don't think they're important, but we think in that fourth quarter of the year, as we move into the future, it is probably a better time of the year for the district to do similar to what Little Rock did, which is an analysis of how the first 3 quarters went, and are we seeing improvements? Are we seeing areas that need to be addressed in the next year? So we want to move to a model where in the fourth quarter of the year, the schools are developing their next year school improvement plans using their first 3-quarter reports for that analysis, and then updating as they get their summative results back in the summertime. So I don't want to say these are not important. I just want to say that for the most part, we're in the phase-out mode for those reports. We also included in with them an analysis of grade inflation. Now, we're not exactly thrilled about how we as a state calculate grade inflation, but again, it gives you a quick snapshot that the priority schools are not significantly different than a number of other schools that are not in priority status in terms of grade inflation. So I think it's something we might want to pay attention to in the future. I think a deeper analysis of ACT results could be beneficial to the schools, and we're in the process of contemplating how we could include that as part of the diagnostic assessments as we go forward into ESSA. The other piece that we've given you is a draft copy of the preliminary scores, and it's preliminary to preliminary, so they're not finalized scores, it's just the preliminary data. And Dr. Arola, if she was here, she would be strangling me because we didn't take out we put a green arrow for things that are not significant going up, and we put a red arrow for things that were going down that really aren't significant. So there's some cleanup in that report that we need to do so that she doesn't strangle me. And that said, are there any general questions that you might have? Or next month, what we would like to do is come back and kind of review how we're modifying all the forms and things as we move into, as we're moving towards ESSA, and how we're still working with priority schools and the changes we'll be asking from them.
Sounds great. Ms. Reith, anything?
No questions, just looking forward. You answered my question with the last comment there. Looking forward to those new forms.
Great. Ms. Dean? Ms. Hook?
Specifically on Dollarway, it said the number of students with 5 or more discipline referrals is 0. Now, if that's right, we all need to go to Dollarway and find out what they did during the time, because that is huge relative to whether you're a priority school, a focus school, or achieving school. Do you believe that information is correct, or they didn't get their information in?
We actually believe they didn't get the information in, but the other part of that is we believe they have made a significant improvement in terms of the discipline referrals.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't take away from the progress that they're making in that area.
Because in turn, that would ripple that they're in class more, and they make fewer D's and F's, and they don't get discouraged in the third quarter, and the ripple to toward the good. So I hope that's right. Thank you.
But in truth, they have made substantial improvement in the referral issue.
Great.
That's all I have.
Mr. Black? Ms. Chambers?
I just wanted to applaud your suggestion that we come back and review inflation and how we look at that in the context of other metrics that we're using to score. That correlation will help, and I hope that's something we get to talk about in the near future.
Yes.
Great. Ms. Newton?
I don't know if this question is for Ms. Kaufman or the commissioner, but going back to the interim assessments, if we're paying for something, and I've heard this from teachers also, and we're not getting great, useful information. We want to pay for a product that teachers can use and get information from. What are we doing on that front? Maybe I see Ms. Smith. So. what are we doing on that front to make sure that we're getting the information that teachers can see, well, this is my child in my classroom and they need help in this area, and this interim assessment told me that.
Okay, so the interim assessment, there's two different actual assessments within ACT Aspire that districts could choose to participate in. One, you have the interim assessments, which are given 4 times a year, and districts have to choose to give it
The whole time.
like, X amount of times. And then there's another one that's our classroom assessment, which is given more frequently, and it's given in specific subject matters. So right now, as districts were trying to determine which assessments to give this year, we saw a lot of them choose to do the interim assessment. And it's different from what they have considered to be interim assessments in the past. So with every assessment, there is a purpose. And I think a lot of districts chose the interim assessment thinking it was going to give them that individual standard information that they were used to getting with interim assessments that maybe they paid for through a vendor product in the past. So our job right now in our assessment unit is communicating clearly what the purpose is of the classroom periodic assessments, the actual interim assessments, and then making sure that districts make thoughtful decisions about which ones to provide. We don't believe that the interim assessments are the right choice for every district. However, we have seen some districts who have used the interims successfully. So there's work on our end to make sure that we communicate what's the purpose of the assessment and should your district choose to offer that or not. And it may not be the right assessment for the Little Rock School District pertaining to what information they want to gather. I know that we currently have some meetings scheduled with the assessment unit and school improvement unit to go back over and really review in-house the different purposes so that our specialist in the field can make sure and give appropriate advice on which direction to go.
But the classroom assessments, and I've been away from it for a year, but they're not available in every subject and every grade?
They're available in math and English language arts and reading, I believe. What? Except for 9th and 10th. There's not one for 9th and 10th.
Yeah. Okay, so it's only, they're
But
only
3rd through
available
8th grade.
3
Mhm.
3 through 8,
Mhm.
and just...
And those were the classrooms, yes.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Great. Ms. Cochran? Oh, Mr.
If I
Dr.
might
Wild.
add
Sure.
to that, districts that will be electing to go with the periodics, the classroom periodics, those assessments can actually substitute in for our 3-week assessments. And so that would also help with the reduction of assessment going on. So that, speaking to what Ms. Smith said, we're trying to set up a time to get together and really review all the assessment processes that are being asked of the schools that have priority status.
Ms. Cochran, anything? All right. All right. Thank you, Dr. Wild. We appreciate all your great information and your great work. Okay. Y'all good still? Okay. All right. We move to the chair's report. I just have one quick thing. I went to a particularly exciting program that is a partnership among a variety of groups, including, of course, the department, but then also Crystal Bridges, the U.S. Department of State's Diplomatic Reception Room, the Butler Center here at the Central Arkansas Library, Clinton Foundation, et cetera. And it's called the Arkansas Declaration of Learning. I don't know who all is familiar with this. It was a very exciting program. It's just finishing. It's a 2-year program for educators. There were 27 educators finished the program this year. And it's a first in the nation program that really creates a partnership between the public arena and the private sphere. And the way it works is that school librarians and educators in the fields of art, social science, English language arts come together to build innovative curriculum around objects such as paintings, objects in the diplomatic reception room that often have deep historical content. It was really great, and the educators did presentations that were really exciting about how they had worked with students, kind of focused around objects, including paintings that are particularly evocative and really tie to key moments in history and civic life in America. And then the students build a civic engagement component so that they are thinking about how to engage with the world, and whether that is bringing greater awareness to the trials and tribulations facing veterans in their communities, or some other piece that really gets them connected to their community. It's just a very exciting program. It just finished its first iteration. There are now 33 educators who are in the second group. I think it's something to watch as a way in which Arkansas really is doing incredibly innovative work that is whole child education, and really bringing in some of those subjects that we know in recent years have not gotten as much attention as math and English language arts. So I just wanted to raise that up, and it was a very exciting program that I went to. Anyone else have things that they would like to report on? Things from the last, Ms. Wright? Anything, Dean? Mr. Black?
I just want to share with you all, at the hotel we're staying at, they're having a conference. It's a conference of teachers. She told me they were elderly teachers, some retired, but they are actively engaged in assisting education. And I just thought it was so great. I really did. And I just wish that was a group we could talk to again.
Cool. Great. Anyone else? All right. Wonderful. We are now ready for the Commissioner's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kim, if you would bring up the organizational chart, just to go over some changes with you, since we've had some transition in the agency. And as you all know, as you look through, we have a vacancy at Chief of Staff because Ms. Kaufman has graciously agreed to move over and to be Assistant Commissioner for Public School Accountability. And of course, Dr. Pfeffer stepping in the role as Deputy Commissioner with Dr. Gocher's departure. And Dr. Owa coming to us from Jacksonville, North Pulaski, to then fill in the opening for Assistant Commissioner for Educator Effectiveness and Licensure. So if, as you see here, if you have questions that come up pertaining to the various issues that are dealt with at the department, this will help you ascertain who might be the best one to call. So, and for now, as we are transitioning, Ms. Hollis will be your contact for board issues. Obviously, Mr. Bradbury, Ms. Hollis will be helping with the logistics. If you want to contact someone about getting something on the agenda or getting information out, Ms. Hollis will be your chief point of contact. I just also want to describe to you a different approach that we are taking, because as you see the org chart, you know, in our state system, we have a new pay grade system that has been adopted, signed and approved by the governor. So there are certain things that we will have to continue to be structured in those budgetary and appropriation type silos. All right. So, but in operations, we're going to look at things a little differently. And I'll give you an example. So as we are bringing new team members on board, and this is especially true in school improvement, rather than school improvement being kind of a separate group out there, we're really trying to get that cross-divisional connection, so that as school improvement is out there working and they see needs of a school that may be related to educator effectiveness or licensure, then school improvement has someone that is assigned or located with educator effectiveness. Same thing when the process of identifying a candidate for special ed. So we're really trying to work across the organizational chart. Now, at the time that annual reviews and those types of things have to be done, and everyone goes back to their organizational structure, they'll be reviewed in conjunction with the other folks at like Learning Services, Ms. Smith, Ms. Kaufman. They will work together on that. But for the purposes of how we operate, you're going to see some differences. You're going to see some much more cross collaboration. And I think that's going to be very important as we move into ESSA, as we move into our Act 930 implementation. We also have here today, as I've mentioned to you all before, and Mr. Tolbert with his retirement, or I think he just transitioned to different type of work and taking care and chasing grandkids. But we brought on Dr. Hernandez, and you all that were here before, you remembered Mike Hernandez as being the previous deputy commissioner, and now he is in this role of the Office of Coordinated Support and Service. If you look at Act 930, as I've described that to you before, it's all about support for districts. It's less about the intensive support for those districts that are in severe need, and it's going to be more about with school improvement, with Dr. Hernandez and all those folks working together, all of the divisions of the agency, working so that we don't have to get to that point of intensive support, giving the districts the support that they need in the development of their improvement plans. As the districts support the schools, we are supporting the districts. So it's a little different approach than what we've taken in the past, and really appreciate the work that Mr. Harvey, Dr. Wild, Ms. Barnes when she was still here, Ms. Kaufman, and now Dr. Hernandez coming on board has done to try to develop what this approach will look like. So if you all would allow, I'd like for Dr. Hernandez and Ms. Kaufman to come up and just briefly describe the work that they are doing in developing this system of support.
Good morning, Mike Hernandez, Office of Coordinated Support and Service. I'm very excited to be here this morning and speak in front of all you guys. Especially excited to come back and work with the department in this new role. I'm excited for a few reasons. One, as outlined by the commissioner in his org chart, is this idea of making school improvement this total approach of looking at all of the various things. Part of my role in developing what we're doing as far as next steps is trying to develop a process where we're coordinating not only the department resources, but also resources that are out there in the co-ops, resources that the local school districts bring to the table, and look at it in terms of systems. And when I say systems, I'll define that for you. Systems in terms of academics, facilities, fiscal operations, human capital management, student services, and as an added piece, communications and stakeholder engagement. How do we have that meaningful stakeholder engagement as we do these things? A lot of times what gets in front of you guys are the symptoms. We talk about test scores. These are symptoms. We talk about fiscal distress. These are symptoms of this larger system. And so as we start to do this, some districts are different than others. We'll be starting to have real great conversations and movements and having conversations in terms of these types of systems as we say, okay, you may have some test score issues, you may have some fiscal issues, but let's look at the broader picture. Let's help these districts analyze all of these systems and then help them develop a plan to say, okay, you may have the test score issue, but you also have a facilities issue that's coming down the road. You also have some personnel management issues that we need to talk about. And let's put this all together in a big package, because we know we want all of these different systems to drive student achievement and successes. And so I'm real excited about that. Also, as a little added piece, I'll be leading some of the evaluation teams for all of the co-ops this year. So that'll be another chunk of time that we'll spend. But I'll turn it over to Ms. Kaufman. Excited to be working with her.
So just to add to that, certainly this is a huge collaborative opportunity for us, both with all of the units within my division, but across all the divisions in the agency, as Dr. Hernandez has described. I think yesterday when Cynthia Smith spoke to you about the changes that have been made in her office, how as they changed from being focused on fiscal distress to changing their name and changing their focus to be fiscal support, districts started thinking about that differently, and they started thinking about it more proactively, more preventative, more, help me do this better. And that's really a sustainability model when you're thinking about it that way, not a wait to fail model. And so in a sustainability model, we're taking all those steps and we're learning a process that we know works. And I think what you've heard from Dr. Wild over these last 2 years is he's been talking about what a true school improvement process looks like and how do we now take this opportunity to make that something sustainable in districts. So we're looking forward to this work. We look forward to talking to you more about it as soon as we can get things on paper for you to look at. So thank you.
Any questions on that part?
I just wanted to congratulate you, Commissioner. I think this is exactly the right thing to do. A suggestion I'd make just from an HR perspective. So when organizations grow up learning how to make decisions which are largely functional hierarchy, so if you've got a vertical, you kind of know how decisions get made within your vertical. And when I've seen us go to matrix organizations in the past where you layer on that horizontal, which I think is so important. Interestingly enough, while people have a great attitude about wanting to be collaborative, they don't always know how to make decisions in a matrix environment. And so making sure that as best we can, we've thought about what kind of training or decision-making right clarity we could be declarative on the front side so that it doesn't grind to a halt as people are nice and trying to work together but don't know how to do the tiebreakers.
And we are learning that. Yes. It is a shift in mindset for our team members. So we're encouraging them that, no matter, as I've told them since I got here, no matter what your position and what your role is, you make decisions every day that affect a kid in a classroom, either directly or indirectly. And that's the approach that I'm encouraging all of our team members to take. But it is a growth process because the hierarchical nature of state government has not always allowed that. So we're working on it. So we appreciate that wisdom. And as I mentioned to you before, we definitely want to get your advice as far as HR issues. So thank you for that. The second thing I want to talk to you about is just briefly is work on professional learning communities. A couple of weeks ago, some of the ADE team went to Atlanta to a Solution Tree Professional Learning Communities at Work conference. There were a number of legislators that were there as well, and back during the session, the General Assembly created a pilot program. And through that pilot program, we are working with Solution Tree to establish a group of probably about 10 schools that will get intensive training and support and coaching on the PLC concept. Now, some of you may be familiar with the PLC concept, either by being in schools or by talking to people from schools. This is the in-depth application of it. And so we're looking at over 100 letters of intent that came from schools around the state. And now the process will be by August 1, having identified who those schools will be that will be part of the first pilot. The idea is that should the General Assembly fund it again next year, there'll be another 10 or so schools that come in, and over time, we will continue to add schools to this. And with the idea being that the expertise and the capacity for coaching, for developing, for working with these schools will be built within the state, and over time, the Solution Tree organization itself will not be directly involved, but that will be the department, our co-ops, our education renewal zones, other support organizations. So Tina Smith is spearheading that effort, and we'll give you a more detailed report on who those pilot schools are. And actually, they will not be identified solely by the department. The Dufours and the Solution Tree folks that have helped develop this model will be helping us identify who those pilot schools are. A number of provisions that they have to say we're committing to be selected. So We're excited about that. We really think that that's going to, we're going to see some a change in these schools as they build on and develop that model, and will be examples for other schools around the state. Any questions on that? We'll have you more details on who those are, because the law becomes effective August 1, and then those schools will be announced at that time. Okay. Finally, Dr. Pfeffer and I'm going to ask her to come up and speak to this, but the CCSSO leadership convening, some of you commented you saw my pictures from Mount Rushmore. It was in South Dakota, and this was almost all of the state commissioners, superintendents of public instruction, and other state leaders were there. And I had Kalisha email you this morning the documents that were the basis of our discussion, and it was about leading for equity. So you should have a document electronically that looks like this, and the leadership playbook, which was developed by CCSSO, that will look like this. It'll give you an idea of what we as state chiefs have said these are priorities for us. If you remember, and I've mentioned this a number of times, after ESSA passed, there were many concerns around the nation that states would see this as an excuse to back away. Back away from equity, back away from serving all children. Well, you know, in our vision, we're talking about meeting the needs of all children, and our values in our mission. We're talking about meeting the needs of all children. So equity is at the heart of what we are doing here. And the discussions really centered around how we as state chiefs, as deputies, can lead our respective state organizations in this. And what's remarkable is that all the states have the same problems that we face here. I mean, there are capacity issues in districts, leadership issues, financial issues. You know, it was amazing that it didn't matter which state I talked to, and as those of you that, you know, Dr. Barth and Ms. Reith at NASB, you probably hear similar stories from your fellow board members in other states. So in a way, it was encouraging that we're not on an island in Arkansas, but another way was a little disconcerting that so many states have the same issues and haven't really found the solutions yet. But our commitment is to continue trying to find those solutions. So, Ivy, if you want to come and kind of give your perspective on that, and then please review these. If you have any questions on these documents, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. And I want to begin by saying it was really good to see how much respect Commissioner Key has from the other chiefs from the other states. Very obvious his relationships there are very strong, and they look at him in Arkansas as a leader. So I think that's important to say. This leadership playbook and that Commissioner Key has shared with you is it's a really great tool for state leaders. And while we were there, we did a leadership self-assessment, and we're able to kind of look at which one of these areas do we feel that we have our strengths, and in which area maybe are we going to need to focus. When we were doing the self-assessment, I told Commissioner Key, I said, I wish you would do mine, because it would probably be a whole lot more accurate if you were filling mine out. And I even tried to ask him, and he was like, it is your assessment, do it yourself. So anyway, I think now that we're back, though, it'll be good. It'll give us a good tool to discuss and to talk about. And it's also going to be good that I think this is something for me to share with the other assistant commissioners. It'll be a good assessment for them to do. But in just looking at the four areas, one is crafting and sharing a vision. One is unlocking potential across the state agency. One is growing as a leader, and one is bringing people together. And what's really exciting is this is already so in line with the work that we're doing. And I think it's just going to give us another tool to use, to plug in, and to see where can we maybe focus some of our efforts so that we are being as effective as possible. I can tell you that the area where I think I'm going to really focus is on the bringing the people together. When I did that assessment, there were some things that I saw in there that I think will help in terms of helping us to share the vision and the goals that we've already started. And then the second is unlocking the potential across the agency. And so I'm really excited about Ms. Chambers working with us in terms of our human resource capacity and the onboarding for new people, and just, looking to see how do we, as we're bringing people together both inside and outside the agency, how do we then utilize our people and make sure that we are equipped with the skills that we need. So it was a very good meeting for me to get to attend and a way to start this, and I think it gives me some tools to use with the really good people I'm going to get to work with.
Great. Any questions?
That's it, unless anyone has questions.
No,
Okay,
go ahead.
let me start with, Ms. Cochran.
The State Teachers of the Year worked closely with the Leading for Equity document, and so I was just curious which area in the framework really stands out to you the most, Commissioner?
You asked me a hard question. Really, I haven't thought about it, about which in isolation, because really they all work. They have to work together. I mean, so really not passing the buck on your question, that it just seems that there's not one that's you can isolate that. And then as we've tried to work in our strategic plan, you can see elements of that throughout, and where we're missing maybe some gaps. That's one of the things that Dr. Pfeffer and I have talked about is we need to go back and look at our SPM work to see if there are some things that are missing. So that's something that obviously with your connection there, and I know Ms. Abels was always good to participate and point those things out too. So we're looking forward to having that input from you, because it comes from a different perspective from the Teachers of the Year. So that please help us. We need that. Yeah.
Great. Anything else over here? Ms. Hook?
Yes, when Ms. Kaufman was speaking a minute ago, and Dr. Weil and the ESSA and everything we're going through with that, it brought to mind in the early days when we were still trying to figure out, but we knew we wanted to serve handicapped children, we often waited until they had failed before we then went in and said, okay, do they have a learning disability, or what is the issue? What can we do to help it? And over time, it evolved into what we refer to around here as RTI, which then got into regular instruction. And I think that's pretty well what ESSA and Ms. Kaufman's group and even Dr. Hernandez is, that we want to try to find out what the issues are before it's a big problem. It's the kind of thing that we had hoped that we would get from Forward. And, so we're all sort of evolving and moving through this together. For many of us as teachers, we knew that if you checked with the child and they didn't get it, then you immediately stopped and worked with them until they did. But that wasn't necessarily taking place in the whole school, the whole district, or the whole state. So knowing what's in line to what you already know is the only thing you can learn. And so going this way and making this progress, and even seeing it at the department, if we're going to say to teachers and principals, let's do RTI, well then let's model RTI from our point of view, which gets to what Ms. Chambers was talking about. What can we as a board do? Well, then we can model the very things that we're hoping districts will do.
Great. Christine? Ms. Wright? Anything else?
One more. So I'm going to distribute this. It is a public document now, a filing that was that occurred late last night in the Doe case. That is the case that was supposed to go to trial next week concerning Little Rock School District. So this is, I'm just simply, without much comment, distributing this so you have a copy of it for information purposes. The parties are seeking a continuance for some additional negotiation, and, other than just what I'm saying here, I wouldn't read much into it other than I think the parties are open for conversation and discussion about possibilities of bringing these cases to some type of end. Beyond that, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what would be talked about, but I know that that's something that you will probably, if you haven't seen a tweet or social media or whatever already this morning, you will probably see it soon, and I just wanted you to have a copy of what was filed in the case.
Great. And I'm sure you will keep us updated as things continue. Great. Any questions? Any other concluding questions? Okay, our final set of activities for this morning relates to our standing committees and related assignments. And so if you'll go into that document, I'm gonna skip around a little bit because it'll make a little more sense in terms of today. Let's go down to the Standing Committee on Academic Distress, so page 4. And I've had a series of conversations with the commissioner, with Ms. Kaufman, with others about how we should handle committees moving forward. I think we're very clear that because of the passage of Act 930, it makes the most sense for the Standing Committee on Academic Distress to sunset. And so it will meet this afternoon. That will be the concluding meeting of that committee. And so, but at the end of that, it will be let go. And what will happen in the coming months will be lots of conversations about what should replace it, if anything, and what form that should take. Through the commissioner, I have asked Ms. Zook, who has been involved with that committee now for a number of years, to serve as the liaison to the Division of Public School Accountability. And so Ms. Zook will bring her knowledge. She will work with Ms. Kaufman and her team, thinking through, first off, the training that we may need, the work sessions or other kind of orientation we may need along the way, and then also what structures may need to come to the forefront. And so I thank her for that role. I thank everybody who's been a part of that committee for your service on that committee, and you're not getting away. So again, we know this is going to be a big work, but we just don't know exactly what it's going to look like moving forward. Okay, so that's the story there. The other standing committee that we presently have in place is the Student Discipline Committee. Dr. Hill will of course continue to serve on that committee, as will Ms. Dean. And so that group will continue to meet. I know y'all did meet yesterday, and now might be the appropriate time for a quick report on what's up with that committee.
Sure, thank you. We met yesterday at 8:30, and we had a presentation from the department about the PBIS, which is the Positive Behavioral Intervention and Supports, and all the work that's going on there. They've already finished their first module that will be available for teachers, and I think it's for RTI for K through 12, if I'm not mistaken. And it's already available. There will be professional development available that is through with ASU in Jonesboro, if I'm not mistaken, and the districts can also give credit to teachers for the training for this as well. But basically, what it's preventative behavioral intervention, not just after the fact with dealing with symptoms, as someone said earlier, but being preventative. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So this really is what this program is about schools and teachers collecting data watching children's behavior and looking for those signals that let you know that behavior is turning toward a certain way, and what we can do to help those children to control their emotions, think creative, what's the word I'm looking for?
Make better choices.
Make better choices, thank you. They're still working on Module 2, which will also have a handbook that goes along with it. We also talked about all of the behavioral intervention or behavioral modification programs that might be going on in different schools that we have no idea about. So they talked about adding that as in addition to the My School, My Info, so that you can look up each school and figure out what programs they have that are working, so that that information can be shared with other schools and other districts. I also brought up the Reclaiming Scholars program with the Tendology Project in St. Mark Baptist Church, and they will be coming to make a presentation whenever that schedule allows. Hopefully, it'll be the next meeting that comes up. And we talked about virtual Arkansas with the ALE schools, and them working together with, I can't remember now. And then restorative justice was also brought up. That's going to be another avenue that we're going to start looking into.
Great. So y'all will plan to meet next month?
Yes.
So before Thursday or Friday?
Thursday at 8:30.
Okay. All right. And so obviously, if anybody else wants to attend that, get here early.
Absolutely.
But Dr. Hill and Ms. Dean will be our permanent folks on that working group.
Yes.
Sound good? And thank you for your service on that.
Welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Now we move to the liaisons, and Commissioner Key referenced it in the conversation about human resources and the conversations he's beginning with Ms. Chambers. You know, there's an awful lot of skills and talent on this board that we bring to this board, and as he and I have talked about, you know, it's really crucial to use those skills and talents while we're members of the board. And so some of these roles will be more informal than formal. And so Ms. Chambers has agreed to stay in conversation with the Commissioner and others about our HR issues. I appreciate that. I know Mr. Williamson and the Commissioner have talked about the interest he has and how those may kind of get formalized across time, and the same with Mr. Black. The liaisons that we have formalized at present, though, are Ms. Zook, who will remain our special education liaison, and appreciate that. And do you have anything today?
Our next meeting is July 26th, and we may actually be able to do, and it really ties in to the discipline, to the instruction, to the two-way communication with parents. It's sort of covering the whole thing. Special ed, from the very beginning, allowed a process to be used, and I think you heard me make reference to it yesterday with the parent from Blevins. You know, you hope that you communicate and work together and not get to dispute resolution, but in fact, if it gets that far, there is a process for that. They are provided objective help as well as the other, so it's a whole process to look after the child.
And then Ms. Newton will, of course, remain our liaison to the ESSA working group, right? Do you want to give us an update?
We didn't meet in June. As you know, the plan draft was put out for public comment, so that was kind of the public comment time period. And so that time for public comment has wrapped up. If you want to view some of the comments, they are on the department's website, so you can go and view them now. And I know the staff is going through and updating the plan. Next week, Mr. Roth and I are going to New Orleans to hear some comments on some of the other plans from other states that have already been submitted, and hopefully we can get some good ideas to bring back to Arkansas.
Great. Excellent. Thanks. Any questions on that front? Okay. Ms. Reith remains as the NASB liaison, still on the board of NASB. Do you any updates on that front?
No, just to say that NASB is one of the proud conveners of the upcoming event that both myself and Ms. Newton will be going to in New Orleans, as well as the Association of State Legislators and the Alliance for Excellent Education. And I'm proud to say that that conference as well will have a bridge with my grant, in that it's in the context of deeper learning that we're hoping to gather from all of the states that have submitted thus far. And for anyone who would like to see the agenda, I did get a copy of the agenda this morning, as I hope you did as well, Ms. Newton, and I'm glad to share that to Ms. Hollis if anyone would like to see who's speaking and if there's some particular sessions that you would like Ms. Newton or individuals with whom you would like Ms. Newton and I to speak. But I'm very excited about this opportunity, and NASB pulled this together very last minute. I think all of us got just a few day notice, and Ms. Newton and I had talked about running up against that timeline, but we're proud to be able to represent Arkansas at that. And then NASB does have a board meeting coming up via phone call next week. And so as we get those finalized materials, I'll also send that to Ms. Hollis in case anyone would like me to lift up any perspectives as we have our next NASB board meeting next week, next Monday via phone.
Great. And again, check your calendars for early November if you're able to attend the NASB annual meeting in Atlanta. It's a relatively easy trip this time, and we would love to have as much Arkansas representation. And I think much like, Dr. Pfeffer and the commissioner talked about, our ability to connect with folks in other states often provides great insights, sometimes commiseration, but also sometimes some really good ideas about efforts that are going on.
And if I could just add one last thing, I will be ending my term on the board of NASB with that November meeting. Now that we are looking at new term periods that align with the national convention that we have every fall, and so with that, want to maybe lift up the opportunity if any Arkansans, we hope that many of you all will join that NASB trip. But that vacancy, my vacancy, the individual that's currently the junior Southern representative will move into the senior role that I played this last year, but then that seat will open. And so it's just been a tremendous learning opportunity, I know, for myself, and then one as well to go a level deeper in working with our colleagues and try to offer some decision-making in terms of how NASB lends resources and support to those of us on the state board. So if anyone would be interested in learning about my position and maybe offering their name up, we will be doing that in the November cycle. So, and I just thank this board and the commissioner who've given me the opportunity these last 2 years, and that you all had to validate my interest in being on that board, and just say I'm very proud to round off my term, my 2-year term on the board of NASB, and thank you for that opportunity.
Great, and thank you for doing it as well. On the Little Rock stakeholders, so we'll come back to the Deeper Learning Grant in just a minute, Ms. Wright. I think we need to have a fuller conversation about that. On the Little Rock stakeholder education stakeholder group, the expectation was that we would have a final report from that group on our action agenda this meeting. That group, as that draft was being drafted, it became clear that they needed to have a face-to-face meeting. And so it became difficult to get that done by the deadline for the materials to be uploaded to the agenda for this meeting. So they are working hard to get that meeting on the calendar. I think things are looking hopeful that they can get that meeting on the calendar in a timely fashion so that we can have that on the August agenda. So that is the plan there. So the drafting is, I think, close to being done, but they really need to come to the same room and talk through that final draft, and they have just not had that opportunity.
And we'll get notice of that meeting?
Yes, it will be a public meeting.
Just like always.
Yes, exactly. And then my final report is on the forward front. The Forward Executive Advisory Committee met yesterday. That had been scheduled for a good while from before I was a member of that group, and so obviously it conflicted with our meeting here. The implementation working group will meet next Thursday, and so I will participate in that. I've been in regular conversations with Susan Harriman. In terms of a quick snapshot of what Forward is focusing on at the moment, in the aftermath of the session, and kind of with Forward now being more fully staffed up, there's a great focus on thinking about how should Forward's mission kind of be stabilized moving forward. I mean, the mission hasn't changed, but where should the points of emphasis be in that work moving forward? Related to that, of course, the communication piece. How should Forward carry out its messaging about its work to the broader public and to key stakeholders? Third big area where there's a lot of attention right now is on the data front. And so we know that Forward had very clear, explicit goals when Forward was originally came into being, and there's also clarity. We need good data to determine whether we're actually moving towards the achievement of those goals for both closing the achievement gap and then raising the bar for Arkansas students in the next couple of decades. And then finally, continued work on the Forward communities, and so lots of action there across those Forward communities. I think that some others of you may have had conversations with Forward folks in recent months. I appreciate that, and that's part of that ongoing effort for Forward, not just to use a liaison as the link between this board and Forward, but also on a more individual basis to reach out. And so I would expect to hear more regularly from the Forward team. And so I'll take any questions on the Forward front, and we'll have a fuller report after the implementation working group next week. Questions? All right, and then the Deeper Learning Grant, our last item right now, and Ms. Reith and Ms. Chambers were involved with that grant, and so I'll turn it over to Ms. Reith to kind of give us an update on where we are with that grant in terms of how much funding there remains, et cetera, and then kind of some maybe initial thoughts on where that grant might go next. But I think this needs to be a full conversation.
Most definitely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to all of my colleagues on the board. I know those last couple months were intense with our action agendas, with our consent agendas, with our reporting, and at the same time, you all showed a tremendous commitment and also patience and flexibility with myself, and also fitting in some ambitious work sessions to be able to try and round off both this Deeper Learning Grant as well as my time on the state board. And I just wanted to say how personally grateful I was, just because I know those were some very, very long days, and some even rushed meals and things like this along that end. And so we appreciate that effort. But I'm proud to report, and especially with the role that Forward played in the end, with Ms. Gina Dickey being a consultant with us in this process and trying to really think through the future of what we garnered from you all's input, as well as trying to connect, as Dr. Barth had said, with Forward and their own sort of strategic thinking about where they may add value, whether it's to, again, the broader education landscape or even to us as a state board. We think we've come up with some pretty good proposals that I'm here to pitch to you all and garner some feedback, as Dr. Barth had said. First and foremost, I do want to affirm we still have some funds remaining in the Deeper Learning Grant in the amount of $3,256.77 as per the last report that I received from Ms. Kaufman. And these are funds that we have still the remainder of this year. Year meaning fiscal year until the end of June of last year to expend. So there is some funds there for some additional follow-up as necessary.
So and then till June of 20.
June of 20, because the grant we received was for 2 years. Okay. And so we still have a year left to use these funds and some funds that we can draw on. And just as kind of a recap of the process itself, we had the opportunity with, at first, NASB's consultants to kind of look at what we're doing in the areas of deeper learning and equity, and identify areas that we've been succeeding in, but also opportunities, gaps. And our last conversations really focused on those gaps that tended to be more in around communication, especially across agencies and departments, but also in engagement across stakeholders, and hence our last conversations that specifically address the topics of communication and engagement. And so where we felt with Ford and myself, Ms. Dickey and myself, as well as Corey Briggs, who was part of that conversation from the Ford team, and really kind of analyzing those sheets that you all filled out in small group and opportunities ahead, we felt an extremely amount of enthusiasm around the topic of family engagement, right? As being family engagement key in the work toward deeper learning and equity. And I feel like that's a topic that doesn't just resonate with the process of the year, resonates with where conversations have been as this board. And so what Ms. Dickey had humbly suggested after looking at you all's forms, it struck her in her own day work. And many of you, if you don't recall, she has played different roles in education and developing her expertise, but most recently from birth to pre-K is where she's been focused in early childhood development and her learning there. And that's led her to some intersectional work with health providers in the state and Head Start and other agencies. And one of the things she highlighted for us was we're not alone as an agency in talking about family engagement or community engagement, and not alone in the education realm, but not alone either in state government in general. And actually right now, a lot of energy in the health sector around what family engagement looks like and navigating families and opportunities. And so what Ms. Dickey had proposed, and as a potential, if there's some interest in moving forward, one, that this deeper learning grant, we wanted to propose no longer just be a liaison position, but we think of maybe, a more committee type approach. One of the things I really appreciated in the brainstorming of those last two sessions was how many of you all attended even the planning sessions for those last two work sessions, which showed a lot of interest in the communication and this kind of engagement, community, family engagement realms. So then the idea could be that this could actually be a committee or / task force that's really trying to help us round off the gaps that we saw right in this deeper learning conversation for us as Arkansas. So one, it wouldn't be just myself, but I'd love to be able to enlist more of you in this process for the year ahead. And I especially, not because she's just next to me, Ms. Dean, but because we all know she has also a passion and expertise in this area. And I'd even love to think of Ms. Dean as maybe a co-chair of this committee with me in this opportunity. So that was one piece of the proposal. We felt the enthusiasm and we wanted to see about maybe bringing more into it. And then the second piece we wanted to offer was we definitely deeply appreciated what Ms. Abels did for us in terms of identifying best practices. And I think we probably all agree she just didn't have enough time. We didn't give her enough time in a really ambitious day. And the starting of the conversation was really only the tip of the iceberg. But then we kept asking ourselves, where do we go from here, right? Because you can go down this tunnel of best practices for quite some time, but it doesn't get us to an end result if there's not a process around it. And so what Ms. Dickey had, I thought, really insightfully shared with myself and Mr. Briggs, maybe we have an opportunity here as a next meeting to meet with some of these other state agencies that are having this conversation on family engagement and how to do it across their whole department and as a systems approach, as Ms. Chambers was saying, and just actually start off the conversation with the process. What's the process by which we're going to look at family engagement at all levels of the department by listening to those who are doing this already and other of our peers that are agencies as well. And then from there discern what we liked, what we didn't like about how their approaches are, and then maybe an opportunity for the year ahead to kind of pick up where Ms. Abels left off with the best practices, but maybe with a little bit more focus because it's grounded started in a process that we're committed to. And so, and again, we do have a little bit of funds with which to work in terms of maybe bringing some stakeholders to the table, or even if there's interest in additional site visits where we can get back to the districts and highlight through our visits the great work that's being done in places. But we thought that before we put the cart in front of the horse, maybe we need to take a step back and ask ourselves some process questions. And so if the board likes these ideas, offers alternative suggestions, just as a first step, and obviously this is at the discretion of the chair, so Dr. Barth at the end, this is his committees, and so we offer this up to him, but as well as input from everybody in terms of feedback on this idea. But if folks liked it, then our suggestion would be in August, on the margins of our meeting, to have a meeting of this committee, whether we want to call it deeper learning, whether we want to be more direct and call it family engagement, whatever that looks like. And then at that time to talk about planning this process type conversation and who might be invited for later in the fall, maybe like September or October. But that we would actually commit to doing some research between now and August about which agencies are doing these family engagement conversations, and bring that research to the table and just start the conversation, and now a little less rushed, a little bit more focused, and bring some ideas about what the process starts, the process piece of this conversation, how we might commence on it. So that's my proposal, and I hope I've done justice to Ms. Dickey in her great ideas and time. But if any of you, I hope you sensed it from the meetings. She is so enthusiastic about this process, and the conversation was had at that table that she would like to play the role as the Ford liaison to this committee, so that it could be a collaborative effort, and that Ford itself is also having conversations around communication, family engagement, place-based work.
Great. So proposal is to create a task force on family engagement, co-chaired by Ms. Dean and Ms. Reith. Thoughts on this as a game plan?
That's actually perfect timing, because I was just about to say that after you got through speaking, that I felt like there needed to be some sort of committee on parental and family engagement, and I was willing to jump in on that. So that's actually perfect timing. You read my mind. Exactly. So I'm ready and willing to jump in, and let's get this area tackled, because I think it's a really important missing element that we have right now. So I'd love to do whatever I can.
All right. And I heard you talking about family engagement earlier. Are you interested in this as?
Yes, this is huge for me. I spent some time as the parent involvement coordinator at my high school, and I've studied a lot of research that Scholastic has provided on family engagement. And of course, it's important to make families feel empowered in the decision-making process, but it's also so critical for families to learn with the students. It takes 11 touches for families to learn enough to help their children read, for example. So this is thrilling. I'm just so excited.
All right. Anyone else with an interest? I don't like huge groups. I'm a smaller group guy, just but I would love anybody else who has an interest. Three is a magic number? Okay. So if y'all, but obviously all your meetings will be announced, and that provides another opportunity, especially if they're on the edges of the board meeting, for folks to attend and participate fully in that, and then we'd stay in touch about other ways in which to more fully involve the board. Does that sound?
No, it does. And I guess just to finalize in terms of the feedback loop, would we want to call this the Family Engagement Committee? Would this still be, that's going to draw on the funds for the Deeper Learning Grant, or keep it in the context of Deeper Learning? I really have no skin in the game or preference, just to be able to report back to NASB with this grant in terms of expectations on this. And I think it really depends on interests in terms of what is the focus, or how we want to represent ourselves in this regard.
Why don't we go with this? How about a task force on family engagement in learning?
Okay.
How about that? Which knowing that learning is a very broad thing and doesn't include just academic, but other forms of learning. Does that sound good? And I would, I think that my view is that committees really should be those things that are intended on bringing, business on a regular basis to this board, task forces, kind of more investigatory, that may grow into committees that are a more permanent part of our structure. That's kind of my thinking.
Oh, and one final thing, Dr. Barth, if Ms. Gina Dickey could be listed as a member of this committee as well, on behalf of Ford. I know that Ford was really enthusiastic about putting time and resources behind this work.
Okay. And then I'll work with Ms. Hollis to get our description of committees and liaisons kind of ready to go for next month, because we're going to have some big changes there. Sound good? All right. Any other questions? Okay. If not, then we are adjourned. All right. I will invite a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Was there sign up for public comment?
Nobody's handed me a...
Was there public comment sign up?
I'm assuming probably.
Okay. Great. Oh, thanks.
Well, I move to hear public comments.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Wright, second by Ms. Dean. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Okay. And then awesome. Great. Acadia Rower has signed up for public comment. Our norm is 3 minutes for public comments, as you know, and we're very happy to have you here and look forward to hearing your words.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. My name is Acadia Rower. I'm a Little Rock resident. I was educated in LRSD schools, and there's also several children that I care for and care about that are currently students in the school district. So earlier, I heard Mr. Poore talk about buy-in, and he mentioned students, parents, staff, and the business community, but he left out the larger community of Little Rock, which I think is really critical to making sure that our schools are strong. And I know you mentioned in August you're going to consider the proposal for second lien bonds, and I wanted to ask you to really carefully think about that. There's, I think, a lot of consequences to pushing that forward. One of them is just the financial questions about the district. We still don't have any clear financial projections or a plan for the district. But more than that, I wanted to speak to just this deep distrust that's been brought up again and again. That May 9th vote was widely seen as this referendum on distrust within the district, the lack of transparency, and the lack of planning for this uncertain future that I know we all talked about. There was an article in the paper this morning actually about the Joshua interveners and the new possible changes to district boundaries and those kinds of things. And so I just think we need to be really careful about how the community is going to view a vote to increase debt, especially in what's seen as a really risky manner when so many people overwhelmingly voted for no new debt until there's some of these things in place. And I just wanted to, I assume in your packet next time there will be this petition of opposition. So there were a couple of hundred signatures gathered and then some comments that I wanted to read from, because I think some of the comments people in the community put when they signed the petition illustrate some of the issues that we're seeing. So someone said, the citizens of Little Rock spoke and that vote is being circumvented. Someone else said the Little Rock School District should get more funding, but this is not the way to go about doing that. The Little Rock citizens deserve input. We voted against new debt. I oppose this. Someone wanted to be sure that the money isn't going to go towards more charter schools. I feel as though the people responsible for making these abrupt decisions are not thinking about how the decisions will impact the people in certain areas. Johnny Key's actions are a betrayal of democracy and show a contempt for the parents, students, and teachers and community members in the Little Rock School District. I don't want the Little Rock School District to take on more debt, and I also want to see the local school board restored. we need to make a priority to repair existing schools first. So, a lot of comments about local control and how those decisions shouldn't be made, that the community needs to be part of this process, and I think that's the main thing, is that there's a huge deficit of trust in this district, and I don't see how we can move forward together unless that is repaired, and these decisions continue to undermine that. So I hope you will really carefully read through these comments, and I'm sure there will be a group in force here next month, so just be prepared. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Rower, and thank you for your engagement in the process. I would now invite a motion to adjourn. All right, moved by Ms. Newton, second by Ms. Dean. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. I will see y'all in August.